Okay, so what we have here today is a 1962 Sea King. I know I got a lot of you guys out there. You have issues with them. They're old. They have problems sometimes. So this motor ran pretty good last season, he said, but he just started having trouble now. And so what I believe is probably a fuel system problem. Maybe a carburetor needs a carburetor cleaning. They use fresh gas. They use brand new stuff as far as tank and hose lines and everything like that. So, but they just said what happens is it would rev really high in neutral, and then it would just kind of stumble and die. So, we're going to take a look at this and maybe get it in the tank, see if I can duplicate the situation, and if I can, try to find the remedy. So stay tuned, and we'll see what happens. So this is what the spark plugs look like. They're pretty oily, and maybe that was the problem, but at least they're getting oil. Oh, by the way, this particular motor has a 24-to-1 mixture on the gas, so I made sure I mixed that quite well, and but that might be partly why those are so oily anyway. But anyway, again, next is compression, so stay tuned. Okay, we're going to give it a go. Gauge is here, so hopefully you can see that. And give it a few pulls. Spark plugs are both out. We're showing just under 90, about 85. About 85 pounds on that top cylinder. And we'll see what we get. Zeroed out. Well, it looks darn close. About 75. Well, that's 10 pounds difference. Give it a couple more pulls. See if I get anything out of it. 65, 70, 75. Yeah, well, between 75 and 80. So, at least compression, it's got compression. I don't know how much was new on this engine, but it might be enough. Okay, I don't know if you can focus on that or not, but let's see. But they're clean enough. I mean, I blew them out with compressed air, and they both look the same. So, I mean, they don't look all worn out or pitted or anything. They're pretty new to me. Okay, spark check is next, and so far so good. Both cylinders showing spark. Right, we squeezed the primer bulb, got it nice and firm. I think we're ready to try to start this little guy.
As you can see, it started right up. I had no real issue at this point. I only had a problem as I tried to throttle up, and every time I did, it would stall. As you can see, the idle adjustment on this motor was pretty rough. The air mixture screw, I don't believe was set properly in conjunction with the knob. So I disassembled the linkage to the upper needle for the slow mixture and readjusted it, and it started to idle much better. The only problem is it would stall when I throttled it up while in gear. And so that's what made me decide at that point that the carburetor does need to be taken apart and cleaned, because it would run at high RPM or wide open throttle, but it was hard to get it there. You had to blip the throttle in order to get it to stay running, just to get it up to that wide open throttle position and stay there. So keep watching. You'll what's coming up is I'll be dismantling the carburetor, cleaning it, and then probably in the next video reassembling it once I know what's wrong with it, what parts it needs, and then we can compare the runnability of the motor after it's been reassembled. What I discovered at this point is the cam assembly on the flywheel, or actually the throttle and the flywheel. You can see where it contacts the bar, right where I'm pointing here, to the throttle on the carburetor. And you can see that there's a huge gap in between that cam assembly and the throttle arm that's there. And that's really not correct. That needs to be at least touching it or adjusted to where, it lines up with the little dash mark that's on that cam. So that might be part of the reason why when you back off the throttle all the way to slow, it wants to die, because the timing needs to be advanced at some point, in alignment with that hash mark on the cam. So as I turn the throttle a little bit, advance the throttle a little bit, so that advance the timing and cause it to run a little bit smoother. On that cam, there's also 2 bolts that can be loosened, and the cam can be adjusted where it pivots out a little further. So I'm going to loosen those two screws up and try to bring that cam follower out to meet that armature where it touches the carburetor, that lever on the carburetor. Those two screws are accessible once the carburetor is removed. You would need a 5/16 wrench in order to fit those two bolts, to loosen them. You don't take them all the way out, you just loosen them. And then you can pivot that cam follower away from the flywheel. So no matter what I did with the adjustments of the high and low speed needles, it just would not continue to run at wide open throttle. I mean, it would run, but only it would struggle to get there. It was so intermittent, and so I just decided that's it. I'm going to take the carburetor off and rebuild it. That's the only problem I see here at this point. So to remove the carburetor, I have two screws in the front to take out, and also a clips. There's 1, 2, 3 little locking clips that have to come off to get the linkage removed from the carburetor, to get it freed up enough to even get to the two bolts that retain it to the manifold, the intake manifold. So this is the dilemma. it's my opinion that the high-speed needle needs to be replaced. It has a nice groove at the point, so it's trash. The float is also made of cork, so that can go. A new one a new kit will come with a plastic float, which is much better for ethanol gas. Also, if you notice the gasket on the Venturi tube was all decomposed, and that I believe is what was plugging up the carburetor. Pieces of that gasket are getting clogged up in those jets. Okay, well, all the parts are clean, ready to go back together. The body came out real clean. I blew everything out with compressed air. And so we're good to go. We're back in business. I just got to get, I've got to get a carb kit and probably replace the high-speed jet, because that jet right there has a groove in it, and that might be creating quite a bit of problems too. And of course, you know, if you have a bad groove in your jet, you need to replace it. So that's what the manuals tell us, and I agree. So, and I believe those parts are available on marineengine.com, and we'll get them ordered, and we'll get this back together.